They say a mother's love is the safest place on earth. But what happens when that love turns lethal? In the spring of 1983, a quiet rural road in Oregon became the scene of one of the most chilling crimes in American history. A mother arrived at the hospital with her 3 children, shot at point-blank range, 1 dead, 2 clinging to life. And her story? A mysterious man on the roadside. But the truth, much darker. This is the story of Diane Downs, a woman whose obsession, manipulation, and narcissism left a nation horrified. Welcome to Screw Crime. Let's dive in. Diane's early life and family background. Elizabeth Diane Downs was born on August 7, 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. Raised in a conservative household, Diane was the eldest of several siblings. Her upbringing was dominated by strict rules and a father who was reportedly emotionally distant and authoritarian. Although she would later allege abuse during her childhood, including sexual abuse, these claims were never substantiated. However, it's clear that her home life was not warm or nurturing, and this emotional void would affect her deeply. Diane was a bright student but socially rebellious. She began showing signs of defiance in her teenage years, rejecting her parents' religious values and eventually being expelled from Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College after 1 year due to promiscuity. Soon after, she returned to Arizona and reconnected with her high school boyfriend, Steve Downs. The two married when Diane was only 18 years old. Their marriage was rocky from the beginning. Financial stress, emotional immaturity, and mutual dissatisfaction plagued the relationship. Despite these difficulties, they had 3 children together: Christy in 1974, Cheryl in 1976, and Danny in 1979. As a mother, Diane's behavior was erratic. She was often cold, distant, and more concerned with her personal freedom and desires than her children's well-being. By the early 1980s, Diane and Steve divorced. Diane began working as a postal worker and became involved in several short-term affairs, one of which resulted in a 4th pregnancy. As she moved through her 20s, Diane seemed to struggle with identity, purpose, and emotional stability. She often sought validation through men, pregnancy, and attention. Her co-workers noted her erratic behavior and tendency to fantasize about romantic scenarios. At one point, she even applied to be a surrogate mother, claiming she loved being pregnant, despite her history of questionable parenting. Her emotional instability and intense need for control hinted at deeper psychological issues. This was a woman who craved love but feared vulnerability. She wanted children but disliked the responsibility. She desired attention but resisted scrutiny. By the early 1980s, Diane's inner world was marked by contradiction, and soon the consequences of her instability would explode into national headlines: the crime and immediate aftermath. On the night of May 19, 1983, Diane drove her 3 children, Christy, Cheryl, and Danny, down a rural road near Springfield, Oregon. According to her later account, she had taken the children out for a drive after visiting a friend. At around 10 p.m., she arrived at Mackenzie Willamette Hospital with all 3 children covered in blood. Cheryl was already dead. Danny was paralyzed from the waist down, and Christy had suffered a stroke that left her temporarily unable to speak. Diane herself had a gunshot wound to her left forearm. She told police that a bushy-haired stranger had flagged her down on a dark country road and demanded her car. When she refused, he allegedly shot all 3 children and then shot her as she fled in the vehicle. Her story, however, quickly began to unravel. Hospital staff were stunned by her strange behavior. She was oddly calm, even cheerful, and made statements that raised red flags, such as expressing concern over the blood staining her car seats rather than the condition of her children. Police grew suspicious. Her wounds were superficial and self-inflicted. The trajectory of the bullets and the forensic evidence didn't match her version of events. A critical point came when investigators discovered casings from a .22 caliber handgun, matching those found in her home. The murder weapon itself was never found, but circumstantial evidence mounted. The public became fascinated and horrified by the story. Media outlets latched onto the idea of a mother harming her own children, which deeply disturbed the American public's sensibilities. Rumors swirled about Diane's motives. Had she done this to win back a lover who didn't want children? Was this about control, attention, or a narcissistic desire for sympathy? Investigators turned to the children for answers. While Danny remained paralyzed and too young to articulate much, Christy eventually recovered enough to communicate. What she revealed would break the case wide open and shatter any remaining illusion of Diane's innocence. Trial, testimony, and conviction. In the months leading up to Diane's trial, prosecutors worked to piece together a narrative supported by forensic evidence, psychological evaluations, and Christy's growing ability to speak. Christy's testimony, in particular, became the cornerstone of the case. Despite her trauma, the young girl bravely identified her mother as the shooter. When asked who shot her, Christy responded simply but clearly, "My mom." Diane maintained her innocence. She made television appearances and gave interviews proclaiming her version of events. But her behavior during the trial was deeply unsettling. She showed little emotion when the injuries of her children were discussed, and at times appeared more interested in how she was perceived by the media. To the jury, she came across as self-absorbed and manipulative. Adding another layer to the proceedings, Diane was pregnant at the time of the trial. She had conceived another child during the investigation, allegedly to appear more sympathetic. This decision backfired. Rather than garnering empathy, it reinforced the perception that she used pregnancy as a tool for attention. During the trial, expert witnesses diagnosed Diane with narcissistic, histrionic, and antisocial personality disorders. They described her as someone who lacked empathy, had a grandiose sense of self-importance, and showed manipulative behavior. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman so obsessed with a man who didn't want children that she eliminated the obstacle, her own kids. In June 1984, Diane Downs was convicted of murder, attempted murder, and assault. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years, with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. The court made sure to block any early release, citing the ongoing danger she posed to society. After her conviction, her newborn daughter, named Amy at birth, was placed for adoption and renamed Rebecca. Christy and Danny were adopted by the prosecutor, Fred Hughey, and his wife. They were given a new chance at life, away from the woman who had tried to end it. Prison life, escape, and continued controversy. Diane was sent to the Oregon Women's Correctional Center. For several years, she remained mostly quiet, but in 1987, she made national headlines once again. She escaped from prison by climbing a fence and fleeing the facility. Her escape triggered a massive manhunt and a media frenzy. She remained on the run for 10 days before being captured at the home of another inmate's husband. She had allegedly intended to flee the country. Her escape reinforced everything the public feared about her. Here was a convicted child killer who showed no remorse, remained manipulative, and was now willing to risk everything to regain control. Additional charges were filed against her, and she was transferred to a higher security facility. Over the years, Diane has continued to deny any wrongdoing. She has filed numerous appeals and given interviews asserting her innocence. But every parole hearing has ended the same way, with denial. The board consistently cites her lack of remorse and refusal to accept responsibility as reasons for continued incarceration. Despite being physically separated from the public, Diane's presence remains unsettling. She has become a symbol of maternal betrayal, her name associated with coldness, deception, and manipulation. Her story has been the subject of books, documentaries, and TV dramatizations. Meanwhile, her surviving children have grown up. Christy and Danny have chosen to live private lives, avoiding the spotlight. Rebecca, the daughter born during the investigation, has spoken publicly about the emotional weight of being connected to such a notorious figure. Her interviews paint a picture of a woman grappling with identity, trauma, and the human need to find peace. Legacy, public fascination, and lessons learned. The case of Diane Downs continues to captivate and disturb the public. It remains one of the most shocking examples of maternal violence in American criminal history. What makes it particularly haunting is not just the brutality of the crime, but the seeming normalcy that surrounded it. The image of a mother, a postal worker, someone expected to protect rather than harm. Diane's story forces society to confront uncomfortable questions. How could a mother harm her children? What creates a person capable of such acts? Are such individuals born or made? The psychological profiles and courtroom testimonies provide partial answers, but some mysteries remain unresolvable. The story has endured in pop culture because it taps into primal fears, of betrayal by those closest to us, of evil hiding behind a familiar face. Books like Small Sacrifices and numerous documentaries have attempted to unpack the layers of Diane's psyche and explore the wider implications of her actions. Ultimately, the legacy of this case belongs not to Diane, but to her children, particularly Christy and Danny, whose resilience in the face of unimaginable trauma stands as a testament to human strength. Their ability to heal, to rebuild, and to move forward is the most powerful chapter in this ongoing story. Diane Downs remains incarcerated. Her next parole hearing will likely follow the same path as previous ones, rejection. But her name continues to spark debate, reflection, and for many, a reminder of the thin line between love and destruction. The lessons of her case are painful, but necessary. It reminds us that evil often arrives not as a monster, but in familiar clothing, smiling, and softly speaking of love. 5 ways. Diane could have gotten away with it, hypothetical alternate paths. For storytelling purposes only, not glorifying her actions. Stolen weapon. If she had used a stolen firearm instead of one linked to her own home, forensic tracing would have been more difficult. No injury to herself. Her superficial self-inflicted wound raised suspicions. Avoiding that might have preserved credibility. Better alibi. A stronger alibi, like being seen somewhere public at the time of the crime, could have disrupted the timeline. No emotional slips. Her strange behavior in the hospital and media appearances raised red flags. Staying composed might have delayed suspicion. Targeting a stranger instead. By not involving her own children and targeting an external victim, she may have escaped scrutiny longer. 5 questions to answer in the comments. Do you think Diane Downs truly believed she could get away with it? What part of her story shocked you the most? Should people with her diagnosis ever be eligible for parole? Do you think her children's testimonies were the key to justice? How does this case compare to other notorious true crime stories? Support the storyteller. If this episode moved you, shocked you, or made you think deeper, CashApp, $forrestjob. PayPal, A Divine Destiny, forrestjob2@gmail.com. Contact forrestjob2@gmail.com. Every donation keeps the stories raw, real, and independent. Subscribe for more faceless deep dives into humanity's darkest truths. New crimes every week. No fluff. Just facts. Twisted. Screw crime, because some stories shouldn't be sugar-coated.